Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let me show you how to master context menus on your Mac. So context menus are menus that appear anywhere on your screen at the location of the pointer and give you control over the object that you're pointing at. Sometimes people call them right-click menus, or Windows users may know them as shortcuts menus. There are many other names as well. For instance, in documentation, sometimes they're referred to as contextual menus. Let me show you an example here. Here I am in the Finder, and I'm going to use two fingers to click on the trackpad with my pointer over this file here. When I do so, it brings up the context menu. You can see the first item here is open, and there are a variety of different commands here. The thing about the context menus is that they operate based on the context. In this case, the context is that file. So these are things that can affect that file. This is different than the menu bar, where the pointer is actually in the menu bar, not over the items that it's affecting. The menu bar can affect the entire system. It can affect the entire app or window that you're using, and also often has commands, usually in Edit and File and other menus, for items that are selected. Selected like this, not necessarily where the pointer is, but what remains selected even after the pointer moves away. So notice, for instance, I can have this file selected here, and if I go to Edit, Copy, it's going to copy that file. But if I move my pointer to another file, like this one, and I click with two fingers on the trackpad to bring up the context menu is for the item that was under the pointer when I used the two fingers to click. So here, Copy would copy that file, whereas in the Edit menu, it would copy the selected file. Now, I've mentioned one way to bring up the context menu, and that's to use two fingers and click with both fingers on a trackpad. But you could also use a mouse and click on the right side of the mouse. Or if you have a non-Apple mouse, sometimes there's a completely separate right button. You can also hold the Control key on your keyboard and then just do a regular click on either the mouse or trackpad. So the basic three ways are Control click, right click, or two-finger click on a trackpad. However, you can customize the way that a trackpad or mouse works. So, for instance, in System Settings here, if you go down to Trackpad, you'll see here Secondary Click. Secondary click is how you bring up the context menu. And you can see the default is click or tap with two fingers. You can also switch that to click in the bottom right corner or click in the bottom left corner, or you could turn it off so you can only use the Control key and click on your trackpad to bring up the context menu. With an Apple mouse, you also have a secondary click setting here, and you could choose right side, left side, or off as well. Now, your settings are going to be different, of course, if you've got a third-party mouse or trackpad. In addition to working on things like files in the Finder, you can use it on items in almost any app. For instance, you can Control click, two-finger click, or right click on a word in a word processing app, and you get a context menu for that word. If you make a longer selection and you bring up the context menu is now for the entire selection. Here I am in Pixelmator Pro, and I can make a selection like this. And if I Control click, right click, or two-finger click inside the selection, it gives me a context menu for that selection. But I could also not have any selection, and the context menu is for the image. Or if I were to Control click, right click, or two-finger click on the layer here in the left sidebar, I get a context menu for that layer. In Safari, I can Control click, two-finger click, or right click on a link and get a context menu for the link. But I could also do it for something, say, like an image, and it will give me a context menu for the image. So it's the context of whatever is under the pointer when I bring up the context menu. So in the Finder here, I can bring up a context menu for an item in the sidebar. I can go down to the dock, and I can use Control click, right click, or two-finger click to bring up a menu for an item in the dock. In the dock, there's an additional way to bring up the context menu, and that's to click and hold, and it will bring up the context menu. Typically, then you have to keep holding, move, and release over the item that you want to select. You can even bring up a context menu for places where there's no item. For instance, If you were to control click, right click, or two finger click on the desktop, so a blank area on the desktop but nothing else there, you get a context menu for the desktop. So even if you don't think there's context, often there is. So the idea behind context menus is when you want to perform a specific action on something on the screen, you don't have to select it and then go hunting for that command in the menu bar. You can simply control click, right click, or two finger click on that item to see what actions are possible, while at the same time indicating that you want that action performed on that item. And you could do this for multiple items as well. For instance, in the Finder here, I can use the Command key and select several files. Once I have multiple items selected, all I need to do is control click, right click, or two finger click on one of those in the selection, and the context menu applies to all of those items. So a copy would copy all of those items. And you can see the context menu even changes here with a new item at the top, allowing me to create a folder with those 4 items. Something you wouldn't see if you were just bringing up the context menu for one Finder item. If you find this video is valuable, consider joining the more than 3,000 others that support MACMOST through Patreon. You get exclusive content, course discounts, and more. You can read about it at macmost.com/Patreon. Now it's important to note that a lot of the commands you'll see in the context menu also exist in the menu bar. They just work only if the item is selected. So for instance, for this file, since it's selected, I can go to File and then use Open, or I can go to Edit and then use Copy. But without anything selected like this, then you could see menu items are grayed out, or sometimes they're active but don't actually work on anything because the menu bar doesn't have a selection. It has no context of its own. However, if you were to control click, right click, or two finger click on the item there, even with it not selected, there is context. So you can access these items. Now often people ask me, well, what about keyboard shortcuts? There doesn't seem to be any indication of keyboard shortcuts for these things here in the context menu. Keyboard shortcuts aren't in context menus because with the keyboard there's no context. The keyboard is not pointing at anything like the mouse or trackpad is. However, as I pointed out before, a lot of those commands are in both the context menu and the menu bar. And you do have keyboard shortcuts there. So for instance, for Open, you could see it's Command O. So as long as an item is selected, you can use the keyboard shortcut for the menu bar. You don't need a keyboard shortcut for the context menu version of that command. So most things that people want to perform with keyboard shortcuts are possible. You just have to select the item and then find the keyboard shortcut in the menu bar. Another question I often get is, can you customize the context menu? And the answer is basically no. The main items here that you see in the context menu can't be changed. They're part of the system and they're augmented sometimes by third-party apps that will add things to the context menu. However, there are some submenus that can be customized. Quick Actions is one of those. If you look at Quick Actions, you see you can customize it and it will launch System Settings and take you right into an area where you can customize what is available in the Quick Actions part of the context menu. So you can see I've got a bunch of things turned on here, but since I had a text file selected, things like rotate left and convert image don't apply. However, if I were to select, say, an image like this one, you could see under Quick Actions, those are there. And there's also a shortcut that I created that I added there. So if you do want to add something to the context menu, the best you could usually do is to create a shortcut in the Shortcuts app and then set it so that it's available as a quick action on that type of file. Likewise, you've got the Services submenu here, which also has some additional things provided by the system. And you could also, inside of Shortcuts, create a shortcut and then make it available in the Shortcuts menu, particularly for the Finder. So it's available here in the submenu. So you can customize these two parts of the context menu. Now I talked about 4 ways to bring up context menus: control click, right click, two finger click, and sometimes with things like the dock you can click and hold. But there's actually a 5th way, using the keyboard. Brand new Apple keyboards, the ones with the numeric keypad on the right, have a special key for bringing up the context menu. It's to the left of the home button. But you don't need that special key because you can also use Control. That's Control, not Command, and Return to activate the context menu on the selected item. So remember, the keyboard doesn't have context. It's not pointing at anything. So instead of relying on where the pointer is located, it's going to take the selection. I'm going to click to select this file here. And then I'm going to use Control and Return. And it will bring up a context menu for that particular item, the one that's selected, not the one the pointer was over. Now you can use this keyboard shortcut in many places, but not all. So for instance, we see it in the Finder here. In Pages, I've got a selection, and if I use Control Return, it will bring up the context menu for that selection. In Safari, it's a little more difficult because you don't typically select things. So for instance, putting the pointer over this link here, I can do Control and Return, and the context menu works on the whole window, giving me some items here that are the equivalent to control clicking on a blank spot on the page. But if I were to select an item like that and use Control and Return, you could see it does bring up a context menu using the selection rather than what's under the pointer. Some apps don't do this at all. For instance, here I can make a selection in Pixelmator Pro and Control and Return does nothing. Or I could go to the layers here on the left. Control and Return does nothing there. So Control and Return, or that special context menu key on newer large keyboards, it's useful, but it doesn't work everywhere. Now once you use Control and Return, you can then use the arrow keys to navigate through the menus here. Right arrow will take you into a submenu, and then Return will activate that. So if you haven't been using context menus much before, your next step is to go into the apps that you use all the time. For instance, if you use Numbers all the time, go into a Numbers document you're working on and try bringing up context menus in different places. For instance, do it for a cell, do it for some text, do it for one of the sheet buttons up here. See what happens when you do it to the background there. See what different things you can do with the context menu, and then see if there are ways that the context menu can make your everyday tasks a little bit easier. Also remember, in the future, if you need to do something with an item on the screen in any app or in the Finder, to try the context menu to see if you could do it from there without having to go and select it and find a command in the menu bar. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. Want to know about every new MACMOST video each week? Sign up for the absolutely free MACMOST email newsletter at macmost.com/newsletter.